The night was cold. The kind of cold that bites through your jacket and makes your bones ache. The street was empty, and the only sound was the echo of footsteps bouncing off the walls of the narrow alley. Maria Santos walked fast, her bag pressed tight against her body, her eyes scanning every shadow. She was not the kind of woman who scared easily. Life had already thrown everything it could at her. But tonight, something felt different. Tonight, the air carried a warning she could not explain. Maria was 31 years old. She had dark hair that she always tied back in a tight bun, and hands that were rough from years of hard work. She was not tall, maybe 5 feet 4 inches, and she did not look like someone who could fight. But looks can fool you. Maria had spent the last 12 years of her life training in martial arts, self-defense, and close combat techniques. It was not a hobby for her. It was survival. And there was a reason she had chosen survival over everything else. Growing up in a rough neighborhood on the outskirts of Buenos Aires, Argentina, Maria had learned early that the world does not protect the weak. Her father had left when she was 4. Her mother worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. Maria had 2 younger brothers, and from the age of 10, she felt responsible for them. She walked them to school. She made sure they ate before she did. She stayed awake at night when the sounds of fighting came through the thin walls of their apartment. She was a child, but she carried the weight of an adult. When Maria was 14, something happened that changed the direction of her life forever. She was walking home from school one afternoon when 2 older boys from the neighborhood cornered her near an abandoned building. They were maybe 17 or 18, and they had been drinking. One of them grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the building. The other, one laughed. Maria screamed, but nobody came. She kicked and clawed and bit, and somehow she managed to break free. She ran all the way home, her heart beating so hard she thought it would break through her chest. That night, she did not sleep. She lay in her small bed and stared at the ceiling and made a promise to herself. She would never feel helpless again. She would never be the person who could not fight back. She would learn to defend herself, and she would become so good at it that no one would ever be able to hurt her or the people she loved. The next week, she found a small martial arts gym 3 blocks from her home. It was run by an old man named Carlos who had been a competitive fighter in his younger days. The gym was nothing special. The mats were torn, the walls were cracked, and the equipment was old. But Carlos was a good teacher. He did not just teach punches and kicks. He taught awareness. He taught control. He taught Maria how to read a room, how to sense danger before it arrived, how to use an attacker's own strength against them. Maria trained every single day. She woke up before the sun and ran through the streets. After school, she went straight to the gym. She trained until her muscles screamed, until her knuckles were raw, until Carlos told her to go home. And even then, she practiced at home, shadowboxing in her tiny bedroom, doing push-ups in the hallway, stretching in the kitchen while her mother cooked dinner. By the time she was 18, Maria had earned black belts in 2 different martial arts. She had competed in local tournaments and won most of them. She was fast, she was precise, and she had a natural instinct for combat that impressed even Carlos. But more than her physical skills, it was her mind that set her apart. Maria could stay calm in situations that would make most people panic. She could think clearly when everything around her was chaos. She could look at a threat and break it down into parts and figure out exactly how to deal with it in a fraction of a second. But life did not get easier just because Maria could fight. Money was still tight. Her mother's health was getting worse. Her brothers were growing up, and the neighborhood was getting more dangerous. Gangs were recruiting kids as young as 12. Drugs were everywhere. Maria knew that if she did not find a way out, her family would be swallowed by the streets. So she made a decision. She would use her skills to build a better life. She started teaching self-defense classes to women and girls in the neighborhood. She charged very little because she knew most of them could not afford much. But the classes grew quickly. Women came from all over the area to learn from Maria. They came because they were afraid. They came because they had been hurt. They came because they wanted to feel strong for the first time in their lives. Maria was good at teaching. She was patient but firm. She did not sugarcoat anything. She told her students the truth about the world. She told them that danger was real and that they needed to be ready for it. But she also told them that they were stronger than they thought. She told them that size did not matter as much as technique and willpower. She told them that every woman had a fighter inside her, and all she needed was someone to show her how to let that fighter out. Within 2 years, Maria had saved enough money to open her own small training studio. It was nothing fancy, just a clean room with good mats and proper equipment. She painted the walls herself and hung a sign outside that read, Santos Defense Academy. Her mother cried the day the studio opened. Her brothers helped set up the chairs for the first class. It was the proudest day of Maria's life. The studio became popular fast. Maria started getting attention from local media. A newspaper wrote a story about her, calling her the guardian of the streets. A local television station did a short segment about her work. Women from wealthier neighborhoods started coming to her classes too. Business owners asked her to conduct safety workshops for their employees. Maria was building something real, something that mattered. But not everyone was happy about Maria's success. In the neighborhood where she grew up, there were people who did not like what she was doing. There were men who felt threatened by a woman teaching other women how to fight back. And there were criminals who saw Maria's growing influence as a problem. She was making women stronger, and stronger women were harder to control, harder to scare, harder to victimize. The first warning came in the form of a note slipped under the door of her studio. It was written in messy handwriting on a torn piece of paper. It said, "Stop teaching or we stop you." Maria read the note, folded it carefully, and put it in her desk drawer. She did not stop teaching. She did not even slow down. The second warning came a week later. Someone had spray painted the word "dead" on the outside wall of her studio. Maria bought a can of paint and covered it up the same morning. She did not call the police because she knew from experience that the police in her neighborhood were either too busy or too corrupt to help. She handled things herself. That was what she had always done. The third warning was more serious. Maria was walking to her car one evening after a late class when she noticed 2 men standing at the end of the street. They were watching her. She could feel their eyes on her like a physical weight. She got into her car quickly and drove home, checking her mirrors the entire way. She was not scared, but she was alert. She knew the difference. Maria started taking extra precautions. She changed her route to the studio every day. She installed a better lock on the door. She started carrying a small personal alarm in her pocket. She also told her students to be more careful. She taught them how to check their surroundings before leaving the building. She taught them to walk in pairs when possible. She was preparing for something, even though she did not know exactly what it would be. Weeks passed and nothing happened. Maria started to wonder if the threats had been empty. Maybe they were just trying to scare her. Maybe they had given up. She let her guard down just a little. Just enough. And that was when everything changed. It was a Thursday night, and Maria had stayed late at the studio to prepare for a weekend workshop. She was alone. The building was quiet. She had turned off most of the lights and was packing up her things when she heard the front door open. She had forgotten to lock it, a mistake she had never made before. She looked up and saw 3 men walking into the studio. They were young, maybe in their mid-20s. They wore dark clothes and had the kind of hard, empty eyes that Maria had seen many times before. The eyes of people who had nothing to lose. The first man was tall and thin, with a scar running down the left side of his face. The second man was shorter but built like a bull, with thick arms and a wide chest. The third man stood a little behind the other 2, and he was the one who made Maria's blood run cold, because in his right hand he held a knife. It was not a small knife. It was a hunting knife, long and curved, and it caught the light as he moved it slowly from side to side. Maria did not run. She did not scream. She put her bag down carefully and stood straight, her feet shoulder-width apart, her weight balanced perfectly between them. She took one slow breath and let it out through her nose. Her heart was beating fast, but her mind was clear, crystal clear. The tall man with the scar spoke first. His voice was low and rough, and he spoke slowly, like he wanted every word to sink in. He said, "We told you to stop. We gave you chances, but you did not listen. You think you are tough because you can throw a few punches? You think you can change things around here?" He laughed, and it was an ugly sound. "You cannot change anything. You are nothing." The man with the knife stepped forward. He raised the blade and pointed it directly at Maria's face. He was close enough that she could see the scratches on the steel. He said, "You are done. Tonight, this place closes, and you disappear, or we make you disappear." Maria looked at the knife. She looked at the man holding it. She looked at his feet, his shoulders, his grip on the handle. In that single moment, she processed everything. The way he held the knife told her he was not trained. His grip was too tight. His elbow was locked. He was relying on fear, not skill. The tall man with the scar had his hands in his pockets. That meant he was not ready to react quickly. The short, muscular man was standing slightly to the left, his weight on his back foot. He was a follower, not a leader. He would wait for the others to make the first move. Maria knew all of this in less than 2 seconds. 12 years of training had turned her body and mind into a machine that could analyze threats faster than most people could blink. And in that moment, standing in her own studio, facing 3 men who had come to destroy everything she had built, she was not going to run. She was not going to beg. She was not going to close her studio or disappear or give up the work that gave her life meaning. She was going to stand her ground. And she was going to show these men exactly who they were dealing with. The man with the knife lunged forward. It was a wild, aggressive move, the kind of attack that looked scary but was full of openings. Maria had trained against knife attacks thousands of times. She knew every angle, every line of attack, every possible defense. Her body moved before her conscious mind even gave the command. She sidestepped to the left, just barely avoiding the blade. At the same time, her left hand shot out and grabbed the man's wrist. She did not grab it hard. She grabbed it precisely, her fingers wrapping around the exact point where the tendons were most vulnerable. She twisted his wrist inward and down in one fast, smooth motion. The pain was immediate and intense. The man's fingers opened involuntarily, and the knife fell to the mat with a dull thud. But Maria was not finished. Before the man could pull his hand back, she drove her right elbow into his ribs with everything she had. The impact was brutal. She heard the crack of bone, and the man doubled over, gasping for air. She then grabbed the back of his head and brought her knee up into his face. His nose broke with a sickening crunch, and he collapsed to the ground, blood pouring through his fingers as he clutched his face. The whole thing took less than 3 seconds. The tall man with the scar had barely gotten his hands out of his pockets when Maria turned to face him. His eyes were wide with shock. He had expected this to be easy. He had expected a scared woman who would cry and beg and do whatever they told her. Instead, he was looking at a warrior. And the warrior was looking back at him with eyes that held no fear, only focus, only intent. He swung at her, a big looping right hand aimed at her head. Maria ducked under it easily. She stepped inside his reach and delivered 3 rapid punches to his midsection. Left, right, left. Each one landed with precision on his solar plexus. The air rushed out of his lungs like someone had popped a balloon. He bent forward and Maria took 1 step back and kicked him square in the knee. His leg buckled sideways at an angle that legs are not supposed to bend, and he went down screaming. The short, muscular man was the last one standing. He looked at his 2 companions on the ground, one bleeding and moaning, the other howling and clutching his knee, and for a moment, he just stood there, frozen. Maria could see the fear in his eyes. He was not a fighter. He was muscle, the kind of guy who looked tough but had never faced anyone who could actually fight. He took a step backward, toward the door. Maria did not chase him. She did not need to. She stood in the middle of her studio, breathing steadily, her fists still raised, and she said one thing, just one thing, and she said it in a voice that was calm and steady, and carried the weight of every difficult day she had ever survived. She said, "Tell whoever sent you that, this studio stays open. And the next time someone comes through that door with a weapon, they will not walk out." The short man turned and ran. He did not even help his friends. He just ran out the door and disappeared into the night. Maria waited until she could no longer hear his footsteps. Then she lowered her fists, walked to the wall, and leaned against it. Her hands were shaking now. The adrenaline was wearing off, and her body was starting to feel the full weight of what had just happened. She looked at the 2 men on the ground. The one with the broken nose was still conscious, but not moving. The other one was groaning and holding his knee. Maria picked up the knife from the mat and set it on her desk. Then she pulled out her phone and called an ambulance, because even though these men had come to hurt her, she was not like them. She was not cruel. She did not enjoy violence. She used it only when she had no other choice, and when it was over, she took care of the damage. While she waited for the ambulance, Maria sat on the mat and thought about what had just happened. She thought about the 14-year-old girl who had run home crying after being grabbed by strangers. She thought about the promise she had made to herself that night. She thought about Carlos and the old gym and the torn mats and the years of training that had brought her to this moment, and she realized something important. She had not just defended herself tonight, she had defended everything she believed in. She had defended the women who came to her studio looking for strength. She had defended the idea that one person can stand up and fight back against the darkness. She had defended her right to exist, to work, to build something good in a world that often rewards the bad. The ambulance came. The police came after that. Maria gave her statement calmly and clearly. The officers looked at the two injured men and then looked at Maria, and she could see the surprise on their faces. They could not believe that this small, quiet woman had done this. But Maria was used to being underestimated. In fact, she counted on it. The story might have ended there. A woman was threatened, she defended herself, and life went on. But this was not the end. This was only the beginning, because the men who had come to Maria's studio that night were not random criminals. They were connected to something much bigger and much more dangerous. And by defeating them, Maria had not just won a fight, she had started a war. In the days that followed, Maria did not know what was coming. She opened her studio the next morning as usual. She taught her classes. She smiled at her students. She acted as if nothing had happened. But deep down, she knew that the people behind the attack would not just walk away. They had sent a message, and Maria had sent one back. Now the question was, who would make the next move? Maria went about her daily routine, but she also made preparations. She reinforced the doors and windows of the studio. She installed 2 security cameras. She reached out to Carlos, her old teacher, and told him what had happened. Carlos was old now, past 70, but his mind was still sharp. He listened to Maria's story and then said something she would never forget. He said, "Maria, you have trained your body your whole life. Now it is time to train your mind for a different kind of fight. The kind of fight that happens in courtrooms and newspapers and on the streets where everyone can see. Because the most powerful thing you can do to these people is not to beat them in the dark. It is to expose them in the light." Maria thought about Carlos's words for a long time. She thought about them while she trained. She thought about them while she cooked dinner for her family. She thought about them late at night when the house was quiet and the world outside her window was still and dark, and slowly a plan began to take shape in her mind. A plan that was bigger than self-defense. A plan that would take everything she had. A plan that would change not just her life, but the lives of hundreds of people in her community. She did not know it yet, but the knife that had been pointed at her face was going to become the weapon she used to bring down an entire criminal operation. Not with violence, not with revenge, but with courage, with truth, and with the kind of strength that cannot be measured in punches or kicks. The next chapter of Maria Santos's story was about to begin, and it would be unlike anything anyone expected. Maria Santos did not sleep well in the days after the attack. Every small noise outside her window made her sit up straight in bed. Every car that drove slowly past her studio made her pause and watch. She was not afraid, not exactly, but she was aware in a way that she had never been before. It was like someone had turned up the volume on the world, and now she could hear everything, feel everything, sense everything. The 2 men she had taken down that night were treated at the hospital and released. She learned this from a police officer who came by her studio 2 days after the incident. The officer was a young woman named Detective Ana Reyes, and she was different from the other police Maria had dealt with before. Anna actually seemed to care. She sat in one of the folding chairs in Maria's studio and took notes and asked real questions. She did not dismiss Maria or tell her it was probably just a misunderstanding. She listened. Anna told Maria that the 2 men had given fake names at the hospital and had refused to cooperate with the investigation. The third man, the short one who had run away, had not been found. There were no fingerprints on the knife because the man who held it had been wearing gloves. Officially, the case was going nowhere. But Anna leaned forward and lowered her voice and said something that changed everything. She said, "I know who these men work for. I have been investigating him for 2 years. His name is Diego Varela, and he runs the largest criminal network in this part of the city. Drugs, weapons, extortion, human trafficking. He has his hands in everything. And the reason those men came to your studio is because you are hurting his business." Maria frowned. She said, "I run a self-defense school. How am I hurting his business?" Anna explained. Diego Varela controlled the neighborhood through fear. He extorted money from small businesses. He recruited young men into his gang with promises of money and power, and he kept women in line through intimidation and violence. Many of the women in the neighborhood were too scared to report crimes because they knew that Varela's men would come after them. But Maria's classes were changing that. Women who trained at her studio were becoming more confident. They were standing up for themselves. Some of them had even started reporting crimes to the police. And that was making Varela very, very angry. Maria sat quietly for a long time after Anna finished speaking. She had known, in a vague way, that the neighborhood was controlled by criminals. Everyone knew. It was like knowing that the sky was blue or that water was wet. It was just a fact of life. But hearing it spelled out so clearly, hearing that her work was directly threatening a man like Diego Varela, made it feel real in a way it had not felt before. She asked Anna, "If you have been investigating him for 2 years, why has he not been arrested?" Anna's face tightened. She said, "Because he is smart. He does not do the dirty work himself. He has layers of people between him and the crimes. And he has connections. People in positions of power who protect him. Some of them wear badges just like mine." She paused and then added, "I am telling you this because I trust you, Maria, and because I think you can help me." Maria was surprised. She said, "Help you how? I teach women to throw punches. I am not a detective." Anna smiled for the first time since she had arrived. She said, "You are more than that. You are someone people trust. Women in this neighborhood talk to you. They tell you things they would never tell the police. You hear stories. You see things. And right now, I need someone on the inside of this community who can help me gather information. Not as an informant. Not as a spy. Just as someone who pays attention and tells me what she sees." But Maria thought about it. She thought about the risks. She thought about her mother, her brothers, her students. She thought about what could happen if Varela found out she was working with the police. But then she thought about something else. She thought about the women who came to her studio with bruises on their arms. She thought about the teenage girls who were afraid to walk home after dark. She thought about the mothers who could not sleep at night because they did not know if their sons were alive or dead. And she made her decision. She said, "Tell me what you need." Over the next few weeks, Maria began to pay closer attention to the things happening around her. She did not change her routine. She still opened the studio every morning. She still taught her classes. She still smiled and laughed and encouraged her students. But now she also listened more carefully. When a student mentioned that her landlord was demanding extra payments in cash, Maria noted it. When another student said that her teenage son had been approached by men offering him a job that involved delivering packages at night, Maria noted that too. When a woman came to class with fresh bruises and said her boyfriend had hit her because she had tried to leave the apartment, Maria gently asked more questions. She did not push anyone to talk. She did not interrogate anyone. She simply created a space where women felt safe enough to share their experiences. And the stories that came out of that space were heartbreaking. They were stories of exploitation, of violence, of a neighborhood held hostage by one man and his network of criminals. Maria wrote everything down in a small notebook that she kept locked in a drawer in her desk. She met with Anna once a week at a coffee shop on the other side of the city, far from anyone who might recognize them, and she shared what she had learned. Anna was building a case. Piece by piece, conversation by conversation, the picture of Varela's operation was becoming clearer. Anna explained that the key to bringing down someone like Varela was not to go after him directly, You had to go after the people around him. You had to break the chain from the bottom up. You had to find the weak links, the people who were scared or angry or desperate enough to talk. And Maria's information was helping Anna identify exactly those people. But it was not just information that Maria was gathering. She was also becoming a symbol. Word had spread through the neighborhood about what had happened at her studio. People talked about how 3 men had come to threaten her, and she had taken 2 of them down with her bare hands. The story grew with each telling, as stories do. Some people said she had fought 5 men. Others said she had used the knife against them. The truth did not matter as much as the feeling the story created. For the first time in a long time, people in the neighborhood had something to believe in. They had proof that it was possible to stand up and fight back and win. More women started coming to Maria's classes, not just from the neighborhood but from all over the city. Maria had to add extra sessions to accommodate everyone. She trained morning, afternoon, and evening. She was exhausted, but she was also energized. She could see the change happening in real time. Women who had walked into her studio hunched over and silent were now standing tall and speaking up. Teenagers who had been too scared to walk to school alone were now walking in groups, their heads held high, their eyes alert. But the attention also brought danger closer. Maria started noticing unfamiliar cars parked near her studio. Sometimes a man would stand across the street and watch her for hours. One morning, she found the lock on her studio door had been tampered with. Someone had tried to break in during the night. The security cameras she had installed caught a blurry image of a figure in a hooded jacket, but the face was not visible. Maria told Anna about these incidents. Anna was concerned. She said that Varela was probably keeping tabs on Maria, trying to figure out if she was a threat beyond just teaching self-defense classes. Anna advised Maria to be very careful about who she talked to and what she said in public. She also suggested that Maria consider hiring security for the studio. Maria almost laughed at that. She said, "I am the security." But Maria did take the warnings seriously. She started varying her schedule more. She took different routes to and from the studio. She never stayed late alone anymore. She also began teaching a special advanced class for a small group of her most dedicated students. In this class, she taught techniques that went beyond basic self-defense. She taught them how to handle situations involving weapons, how to protect others in a crisis, and how to respond to multiple attackers. She was building a team, though she did not call it that. She was creating a network of strong, capable women who could take care of themselves and each other. One of these students was a woman named Laura. Laura was 35 years old, a single mother of 3 children, and she had been coming to Maria's classes for almost a year. Laura had a quiet strength about her. She did not say much, but when she moved, there was a precision and power that Maria recognized. Laura was a natural fighter, and she was also incredibly brave. Maria learned that Laura had escaped an abusive relationship 2 years earlier and had been living in a women's shelter when she first found Maria's studio. Since then, Laura had rebuilt her life. She had found a job, rented a small apartment, and was raising her children on her own. She credited Maria's classes with giving her the confidence to start over. What Maria did not know at first was that Laura had a connection to Diego Varela. Laura's ex-boyfriend, the man she had escaped, was one of Varela's lieutenants. His name was Roberto Fuentes, and he was one of the most feared men in the neighborhood. Roberto ran the extortion side of Varela's operation. He collected payments from businesses, managed the street-level enforcers, and dealt with anyone who caused problems. He was violent, unpredictable, and he had never forgiven Laura for leaving him. Laura told Maria about Roberto one evening after class. They were sitting on the mats in the empty studio, drinking water, and Laura suddenly started talking. It was like a dam had broken. She told Maria everything. She told her about the years of abuse, the broken bones, the nights spent locked in a closet. She told her about how Roberto had threatened to kill her if she ever left. She told her about the night she finally escaped, sneaking out through a window at 3 a.m. with her children in her arms. And she told Maria that Roberto was still looking for her. Maria listened without interrupting. When Laura was finished, Maria put her hand on Laura's shoulder and said, "You are safe here, and I promise you I will do everything I can to make sure you stay safe." But Maria knew that promises were not enough. Roberto Fuentes was dangerous, and if he found Laura, the consequences could be devastating. Maria told Anna about Laura's story at their next meeting. Anna's eyes widened when she heard Roberto's name. She said, "Roberto Fuentes is one of the people I have been trying to get to. He is Varela's right hand. If we could get him to talk, or if we could catch him in the act, it could break the whole case open." Maria saw the opportunity, but she also saw the danger. Using Laura's story to build a case against Roberto would put Laura at risk. Maria was not willing to do that without Laura's full knowledge and consent. So she went back to Laura and had an honest conversation. She told Laura about Anna's investigation. She told her about the possibility of taking down Roberto and Varela and the entire operation. And she told Laura that none of it would happen without Laura's agreement. Laura was quiet for a long time. Maria could see the fear in her eyes. The fear of Roberto. The fear of what he would do if he found out she was involved. But Maria could also see something else. She could see anger. A deep, burning anger that had been building for years. The anger of a woman who had been beaten and controlled and told she was worthless. The anger of a mother who had been forced to raise her children in fear, and that anger was stronger than the fear. Laura looked at Maria and said, "I will do it, but not just for me. For every woman he has ever hurt. For every woman Varela has ever hurt. I want them to pay for what they have done." From that point on, things moved quickly. Anna worked with Laura to document everything she knew about Roberto's activities. Laura had lived with him for 8 years, and she knew more than anyone realized. She knew the locations of safe houses where drugs were stored. She knew the names of the police officers who were on Varela's payroll. She knew the schedule of the weekly cash collections from businesses. She knew the codes and signals that Varela's men used to communicate. She had absorbed all of this information during her years with Roberto, not because she was trying to spy, but because she was trying to survive. Knowing how the operation worked had been her way of predicting danger, of knowing when Roberto would be angry, of knowing when to stay out of the way. Anna was amazed by the level of detail Laura could provide. With Laura's information, Anna was able to map out the entire structure of Varela's organization. She identified the key players, the money trails, the distribution networks, and the corrupt officials who enabled everything. But Anna knew that information alone was not enough. She needed evidence. She needed recordings, documents, transactions. She needed things that would hold up in court. This was where things got complicated. Anna was working within a police department that she did not fully trust. She knew that some of her colleagues were on Varela's payroll. If word got out that she was building a case, it could be shut down before it even started. Or worse, the information could be leaked to Varela, and the people who were helping, Maria, Laura, and the other women, could be targeted. Anna made a difficult decision. She went outside her own department and contacted a federal prosecutor named Gabriel Mendez. Gabriel was known for being incorruptible. He had built his career on taking down organized crime, and he had a reputation for protecting his witnesses. Anna shared everything she had with Gabriel, and he agreed to take the case. But he also warned her that they would need to move carefully and quickly. The longer it took, the greater the chance that Varela would find out. Meanwhile, Maria continued her work at the studio. She was now operating on 2 levels. On the surface, she was still the self-defense instructor, teaching classes and running workshops. But underneath, she was a key part of a growing network that was gathering evidence against the most powerful criminal in the neighborhood. She did not carry a gun. She did not wear a wire. She did not do anything dramatic or dangerous. She simply kept her eyes open and her ears tuned to the stories that women told her in the safety of her studio. One story in particular stood out. A young woman named Sophia came to Maria's class for the first time. She was 19 years old, thin and pale, with dark circles under her eyes. She barely spoke during the class and flinched every time someone moved too quickly near her. After the class, Maria approached her gently and asked if she was okay. Sophia burst into tears. Sophia's story was one of the worst Maria had ever heard. Sophia had been recruited by Varela's organization when she was 16. She had been promised a job as a waitress in a restaurant. Instead, she had been taken to a house on the edge of the city and forced into a trafficking operation. For 3 years, Sophia had been held against her will, moved from location to location, and exploited in ways that Maria could barely listen to without feeling sick. Sophia had finally escaped 6 months earlier when she managed to slip out of a window during a power outage. She had been living on the streets ever since, too afraid to go to the police, too ashamed to go home. Maria held Sophia while she cried. She made her tea. She gave her food. And then she made some phone calls. Within hours, Sophia was in a safe house run by a women's organization that Anna had connected Maria to. She had a bed, clean clothes, and access to a counselor. And her story, with her permission, became another piece of the puzzle that Anna and Gabriel were assembling. The case was growing. Every week brought new information, new witnesses, new evidence. Anna had managed to obtain financial records that showed payments flowing from businesses in the neighborhood to accounts controlled by Varella's associates. Gabriel had secured warrants to monitor communications. The net was tightening. But Maria knew that things were also getting more dangerous. She noticed that the surveillance around her studio had increased. The unfamiliar cars were there almost every day now. One afternoon, a man walked into the studio during a class and just stood there watching. He did not say anything. He did not sign up for a class. He just watched for about 15 minutes and then left. Maria's students were unnerved, but Maria kept the class going as if nothing had happened. That night, Maria received a phone call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was calm and measured, nothing like the rough voices of the men who had attacked her before. This voice belonged to someone educated, someone in control. The voice said, "Maria Santos, I have been watching you. You are very talented, very brave. But bravery without wisdom is just another word for stupidity. You have been making friends in dangerous places. I suggest you choose your friends more carefully." The line went dead. Maria stared at her phone for a long time. She knew that voice had to be connected to Varela, if not Varela himself. The message was clear. They knew she was up to something. They might not know exactly what, but they knew enough to be worried. And worried people are dangerous people. Maria called Anna immediately. Anna was alarmed but not surprised. She said that this meant they were running out of time. They needed to move faster. Gabriel agreed. He said he would push for the arrest warrants to be issued within the next 2 weeks. Until then, everyone needed to be extremely careful. The next 2 weeks were the longest of Maria's life. She went through her daily routine like a sleepwalker, her body going through the motions while her mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. She worried about Laura, who was now staying in a different safe house every few days. She worried about Sophia, who was still fragile and scared. She worried about her students, many of whom had no idea what was going on behind the scenes. And she worried about her family, her mother, her brothers. If Varela decided to send a message, they would be the easiest targets. Maria moved her mother and brothers to her aunt's house in another city. She told her mother it was just a precaution, that she was having some work done on the apartment. Her mother looked at her with eyes that said she knew the truth but would not argue. Her mother had spent her whole life worrying about Maria, and she had learned long ago that telling Maria not to do something was like telling the wind not to blow. The days ticked by. Each one felt longer than the last. Maria trained harder than ever, pushing herself through workouts that left her gasping and drenched in sweat. The physical exertion was the only thing that kept the anxiety at bay. She hit the heavy bag until her knuckles bled through her wraps. She ran until her legs gave out. She practiced her techniques until every movement was as natural as breathing. And then, on a Tuesday morning, Anna called. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it that Maria had not heard before. Anna said 3 words that made Maria's heart stop, and then start again with a force that shook her entire body. Anna said, "We are ready." The operation was set for the following night. Gabriel had secured arrest warrants for Varela, Roberto Fuentes, and 23 other members of the organization. Multiple law enforcement agencies were involved, including federal officers who had been brought in specifically because they could not be compromised by local corruption. It was going to be a coordinated strike, hitting multiple locations simultaneously to prevent anyone from escaping or destroying evidence. Maria's role in the operation was simple. She was to stay home and stay safe. Anna had been very clear about that. Maria was a civilian, not a law enforcement officer. Her job was done. She had helped gather the information that made the case possible. Now it was time for the professionals to do their work. Maria agreed. She said she would stay home. She said she would lock her doors and wait for Anna's call. But even as she said the words, something inside her knew that it would not be that simple. Something told her that the night ahead would test her in ways she could not yet imagine, and that before it was over, she would have to use every skill she had ever learned, not just the physical ones, but the mental and emotional ones too. She sat in her apartment that evening, the lights low, the television off, her phone in her hand. Outside, the city hummed with its usual noise. Cars, voices, music, the distant wail of a siren. Everything sounded normal, but nothing was normal. Somewhere out there, dozens of officers were moving into position. Somewhere out there, Diego Varela was going about his evening, unaware that his world was about to collapse. And somewhere out there, the future of an entire neighborhood was hanging in the balance. Maria closed her eyes and waited for the storm. The clock on Maria's wall read 9:47 when her phone buzzed for the first time. It was a text from Anna, just 2 words. It started. Maria read the message and set her phone on the table and pressed her palms together in front of her face. She was not a religious person, not in the traditional sense, but in that moment she found herself whispering something that felt like a prayer. She was not praying for herself. She was praying for Laura, for Sophia, for every woman who had trusted her with their stories. She was praying that tonight would be the beginning of the end of their suffering. The next hour was agony. Maria sat in her dark apartment and listened to the city outside. Every siren made her heart jump. Every loud voice made her stand up and look out the window. She paced back and forth, her bare feet making soft sounds on the tile floor. She made tea and did not drink it. She turned on the television and turned it off again. She picked up her phone 100 times to check for messages, and there were none. At 11:15, her phone rang. It was Anna. Maria answered so fast she almost dropped the phone. Anna's voice was strained, tight, like she was holding something back. She said, "Maria, we have a problem." Maria felt her stomach drop. She said, "What happened?" Anna explained quickly. The raids had been mostly successful. They had hit 12 locations across the city and arrested 19 people. They had seized drugs, weapons, cash, and documents. Roberto Fuentes had been arrested at his apartment without incident. He had been in bed when the officers broke down the door, and he had surrendered immediately. Several other key members of the organization had also been taken into custody. By any standard, the operation was a major success. But there was one critical failure. Diego Varela was not at any of the targeted locations. His penthouse apartment was empty. His office was cleared out. His car was gone. Somehow, Varela had been tipped off. Somewhere in the chain of information, there had been a leak, and Varela had used the warning to disappear. Maria sat down slowly. She said, "So, he is out there, free." Anna said yes. "And Maria, there is something else. We found a list in Varela's office. It was a handwritten list of names, people he considered threats. Your name was on it, and next to your name, there was an address." She paused. "Your address." The words hit Maria like a physical blow. Varela knew where she lived. He had known for some time, and now he was out there, cornered and desperate, with nothing to lose. Maria understood in that moment that the most dangerous version of Diego Varela was not the man who sat in his penthouse and gave orders from a distance. It was the man who had lost everything and was looking for someone to blame. Anna told Maria that she was sending a patrol car to her apartment immediately. She told her to stay inside, keep the doors locked, and not open them for anyone she did not recognize. Maria said she would. But even as she agreed, her mind was already working, calculating, planning. She was not going to sit and wait to be hunted. That was not who she was. The patrol car arrived within 20 minutes. Maria could see it from her window parked across the street with its lights off. 2 officers sat inside, their faces lit by the glow of their phones. Maria felt a small measure of relief, but it was not enough. She knew that a patrol car could be evaded. She knew that Varela had resources and connections that could make 2 officers in a parked car irrelevant. She made a decision. She pulled out the small notebook she kept in her desk, the one where she had been recording information for months, and she tore out the pages and put them in a sealed envelope. She wrote Anna's name on the front and hid the envelope behind a loose brick in the wall of her kitchen. If anything happened to her, Anna would know where to look. Then she changed into dark clothes and running shoes. She tied her hair back. She put her phone in her pocket and her keys on a cord around her neck. And she waited. For 2 hours, nothing happened. The patrol car stayed in its spot. The street was quiet. Maria began to think that maybe she was overreacting. Maybe Varela was already on a plane to another country. Maybe he had bigger things to worry about than one self-defense instructor. Maybe she was giving herself too much importance. And then, at 1:30 in the morning, the patrol car drove away. Maria watched it go, a cold feeling spreading through her chest. She had not received any notification from Anna. No one had called her to say the officers were being reassigned. The car simply pulled away from the curb and disappeared around the corner. Maria grabbed her phone and called Anna. No answer. She called again. No answer. She sent a text. No reply. Something was very wrong. Maria moved quickly. She turned off all the lights in her apartment. She went to each window and checked the street below. From the living room window, she could see nothing unusual. From the bedroom window, she noticed a black van parked at the end of the block that had not been there before. It was sitting in a pool of shadow between two streetlights, its engine off, its windows tinted so dark she could not see inside. Maria's training took over. Her fear did not disappear, but it moved to the back of her mind, making room for the cold, clear focus that had saved her life before. She assessed her situation. She was alone in a third-floor apartment. There was one entrance, the front door, and a fire escape accessible from the bedroom window. She had no weapons, but she had her skills, her awareness, and her knowledge of the building and the surrounding streets. She decided she was not going to wait in the apartment like a sitting target. If someone was coming for her, she wanted to be in a position of her own choosing, not trapped in a box. She put on a dark jacket, opened the bedroom window quietly, and climbed onto the fire escape. The metal was cold and slightly wet from the night air. She moved down the ladder quickly and silently, her feet barely making a sound on the rungs. At the bottom, she dropped into the narrow alley behind her building. She pressed herself against the wall and listened. The city was never truly silent, but at this hour, the normal sounds were muted. Distant traffic, a dog barking somewhere far away, the hum of air conditioning units. Nothing close, nothing threatening. She moved down the alley toward the street. At the corner, she stopped and peered around the edge of the building. The black van was still there, about 50 meters away. As she watched, the side door of the van opened and 2 men got out. They were dressed in dark clothing and moved with a purpose that told Maria they were not there by accident. One of them looked up at her apartment building. The other checked his phone. Then they started walking toward the main entrance of her building. Maria pulled back behind the wall. Her heart was pounding, but her breathing was steady. She had 2 choices. She could run, she could disappear into the night and find a safe place to hide until daylight. That was the smart choice, the safe choice. Or she could stay. She could watch. She could find out who these men were and what they wanted. That was the dangerous choice. But it was also the choice that could give her the information she needed to end this once and for all. She chose to stay. She moved along the back of the building to a spot where she could see the front entrance without being seen. She crouched behind a dumpster and watched. The 2 men entered the building. The front door was supposed to be locked, but it was an old building and the lock was unreliable. Maria waited, counting the seconds in her head. She estimated it would take them about 2 minutes to climb the stairs to the 3rd floor and reach her apartment. About 3 minutes later, she heard a sound from above. A sharp crack, like a door being forced open. Then silence. Then voices muffled by distance and walls. They were in her apartment. They would find it empty. And then they would start looking for her. Maria did not wait around to see what they would do next. She moved quickly and quietly down the street, staying close to the walls and in the shadows. She needed to get to her studio. It was the only place she could think of where she had an advantage. She knew every corner of that building, every entrance and exit, every place to hide, and every place to fight. If a confrontation was coming, she wanted it on her terms, in her territory. The studio was 8 blocks away. Maria covered the distance in under 10 minutes, moving at a fast walk that was almost a run but quiet enough to avoid attracting attention. When she arrived, the street was empty. The studio looked untouched. She unlocked the door with the key around her neck and slipped inside. The familiar smell of the training mats hit her immediately. Rubber and sweat and something that was uniquely hers. This place was more than a business. It was her sanctuary. It was the place where she had built her identity, where she had helped hundreds of women find their strength, where she had stood her ground against men who tried to break her. If she had to make a last stand, she could not think of a better place. She locked the door behind her and moved through the studio in the dark, checking every window and every room. Everything was secure. She turned on the security cameras and checked the monitors. The street outside was quiet. She saw no vehicles, no figures, no movement. She allowed herself a small breath of relief. Then she tried Anna's phone again. This time, Anna answered. Anna's voice was frantic. She said, "Maria, where are you? I have been trying to reach you. My phone died, and I just got a charger." The patrol car was called away on a false report. It was a setup. Someone in the department is working for Varela. "I am on my way to your apartment." Maria said, "Do not go to my apartment. There are men there looking for me. I am at the studio." There was a pause. Then Anna said, "Stay there. Lock everything. I am coming to you with backup. Real backup. Federal officers. Do not open the door for anyone until I get there. Do you understand?"
Maria said she understood.
Anna said she would be there in 30 minutes. Maria hung up and looked around her studio. 30 minutes. She just had to hold on for 30 minutes. 15 of those minutes passed without incident. Maria sat on the mat in the middle of the studio floor, cross-legged, breathing slowly and deeply. She was centering herself the way Carlos had taught her years ago, clearing her mind of everything except the present moment. The past did not matter. The future did not matter. Only now. Then she heard it. A sound at the back door of the studio. Not the front door which faced the street and was visible on the security cameras. The back door, which opened onto a small courtyard that connected to an alley. Maria had reinforced this door weeks ago, but she could hear someone working on the lock. Whoever it was, knew the building. They knew about the back entrance. Maria stood up in one fluid motion. She moved to the supply closet near the back door and took a position behind the partially open door, where she could see the back entrance but could not be seen from it. She controlled her breathing, slowing it down until it was almost inaudible. She relaxed her muscles, keeping them loose and ready but not tense. Tension slows you down. Carlos had taught her that. The back door opened. A man stepped inside. He was alone, which surprised Maria. She had expected more. He was tall, well-dressed, wearing a dark suit and polished shoes that seemed out of place in a martial arts studio. His hair was neatly combed and his face was clean-shaven. He carried no visible weapon, but his right hand was inside his jacket pocket. He moved with the careful, measured steps of someone who was used to being in control. Maria knew who he was before he even spoke. She had never met him, never seen his face in person, but she had studied photographs that Anna had shown her. She had memorized the way he held his shoulders, the slight tilt of his head when he was thinking, the thin scar on his left eyebrow from a fight in his youth. This was Diego Varela. He walked to the center of the studio and stood there, looking around. He seemed almost curious, like a tourist visiting a local attraction. He looked at the punching bags, the training equipment, the motivational posters on the walls. Then he spoke, and his voice was the same calm, measured voice that had called Maria on the phone weeks earlier. He said, "So this is where it all started, this little room. This little woman with her little classes." He smiled, and it was a smile that held no warmth. "You have caused me a great deal of trouble, Maria Santos. A great deal of expense. People I have spent years building relationships with are now sitting in jail cells because of you. Business operations that took decades to establish have been destroyed in a single night, and all because you decided to teach women how to throw punches." Maria did not move from her position behind the closet door. She watched him through the crack, studying his body language, his movements, his position in the room. His right hand was still in his jacket pocket. She could see the outline of something through the fabric. A small handgun, she guessed. But he had not drawn it. He was talking, which meant he wanted something. People who come to kill you do not usually start with a conversation. Varela continued. I am a businessman, Maria. I do not enjoy violence. I use it when I have to, but I prefer to solve problems with negotiation. So I have come here tonight to offer you a deal. He paused, letting the word hang in the air. You have connections with the detective and the prosecutor. You know things about my operation that could be useful to me. Here is what I propose. You come with me. You tell me exactly what information you provided and who you provided it to. You help me identify the weak points in the case against me. And in return, I let you live. I let your family live. I let your students live. Everyone walks away. The room was silent for a moment. Then Maria stepped out from behind the closet door. She walked slowly to the center of the studio and stood facing Varela about 3 meters away from him. She looked him in the eyes. She had expected to see evil there, pure darkness, the eyes of a monster. But what she saw was more unsettling. She saw intelligence. She saw calculation. She saw a man who genuinely believed that the world was a chessboard, and he was the only player that mattered. Maria said, "You came here alone." Varela tilted his head. He said, "I came here to talk. I do not need an army for a conversation." Maria said, "You are not here to talk. You are here because you are running out of time. Your organization is collapsing. Your people are being arrested. Your money is being seized. You have nowhere to go and no one left to trust. So you came to the one person you think you can still intimidate, the woman who teaches punches in a little room." Something flickered in Varela's eyes, annoyance maybe, or surprise. He was not used to being spoken to like this. He pulled his hand slowly from his pocket, and Maria saw the gun. It was small, silver, almost elegant. He held it at his side, not pointing it at her but making sure she could see it. He said, "I am offering you a way out, Maria. I suggest you take it." Maria looked at the gun. She looked at the distance between them. 3 meters. About 10 feet. She knew from her training that a person with a gun at that distance has a significant advantage. But she also knew something else. She knew that people who are not trained to use firearms in close combat often make mistakes. They hesitate. They aim too carefully. They tense up at the crucial moment. And those mistakes create openings. But Maria was not planning to fight. Not yet. She was planning to talk. She was planning to keep Varela in the studio for as long as possible, because every minute that passed was a minute closer to Anna's arrival with federal officers. Maria said, "Let me ask you something, Diego. Do you know why I started this studio?" Varela looked mildly amused. He said, "I do not care." Maria continued as if he had not spoken. She said, "I started it because when I was 14 years old, 2 men tried to drag me into an abandoned building. And nobody came to help me. Nobody heard me scream. And I realized that day that the only person who was going to protect me was me. So I learned how to fight. And then I taught other women how to fight. Not because I wanted to cause trouble for you or anyone else, but because I believe that every person deserves to feel safe. Every woman, every girl, every mother, every daughter." Varela shook his head slowly. He said, "You are stalling." Maria said, "Maybe. Or maybe I am trying to make you understand something. You see me as a threat to your business, but I am not. I am a consequence. I exist because you exist. The fear you create is the soil that grew me. If you had not turned this neighborhood into a prison, I would just be a woman who likes martial arts. But you made it necessary for women to learn to fight. You made me necessary." Varela raised the gun slightly, not pointing it at her, but lifting it from his side in a gesture that was clearly meant to remind her of the power he held. "And," he said, "enough. I did not come here for a philosophy lesson. Give me your answer. Come with me and cooperate, or this ends very differently." Maria looked at Varela. She looked at the gun, and then she smiled. It was not a defiant smile or a cocky smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something the other person did not. She said, "There is something you should know, Diego. When I installed the security cameras in this studio, I did not just put them on the outside. There are cameras inside too. And right now, everything you have said, every word, every threat, and that gun in your hand is being recorded. For the first time, She saw real fear flash across Varela's face. His eyes darted to the corners of the room, searching for the cameras. Maria had not been bluffing. There were 2 cameras inside the studio, small and discreet, mounted in corners where they were nearly invisible. They had been recording since the moment Maria entered the building. Varela's composure cracked. His hand tightened on the gun. His jaw clenched. And in that moment, Maria saw the situation shift. The calm businessman was gone. The cornered animal was emerging, and cornered animals are the most dangerous. He raised the gun and pointed it directly at Maria's chest. He said through clenched teeth, "Then I will take the cameras too." Not consciously, not with a specific plan, but with every hour of training she had done over the past 12 years. Her body was a weapon, and her mind was the hand that wielded it. She had run this scenario 1,000 times in training. An attacker with a handgun at close range. The key was speed, angle, and commitment. You could not hesitate. You could not second guess. You had to move all at once, with everything you had. But she did not have to, because at that exact moment, the front door of the studio burst open. Federal officers poured in, weapons drawn, shouting commands in voices that shook the walls. Anna was right behind them, her badge hanging around her neck, her own weapon aimed at Varela. Varela spun toward the door, his gun hand swinging wildly. Maria moved, not toward Varela, but away from his line of fire, dropping to the ground and rolling behind the heavy punching bag that hung from the ceiling. She heard shouting. She heard commands to drop the weapon. She heard Anna's voice, clear and sharp above the chaos. And then she heard the sound of a gun clattering to the floor. When Maria looked up, Varela was on his knees with his hands behind his head. 3 federal officers had their weapons trained on him. Anna was picking up his gun with a gloved hand and placing it in an evidence bag. The look on Varela's face was something Maria would remember for the rest of her life. It was the look of a man who had spent decades believing he was untouchable, only to discover in a single moment that he was not. Anna helped Maria to her feet. Her hands were shaking, and she realized that her whole body was trembling. The adrenaline was crashing, and the reality of what had just happened was sinking in. She had been face to face with the most dangerous man in the city. He had pointed a gun at her, and she had survived. Anna hugged her. It was a quick, tight hug, the kind that said more than words could. Then Anna pulled back and said, "The cameras. Tell me they were really recording." Maria nodded. She walked to the back of the studio, opened a small cabinet, and pulled out the recording device. She handed it to Anna. Everything. Every word. Every threat. The gun. Anna looked at the device, and then looked at Maria and shook her head in disbelief. She said, "You are something else, Maria Santos." The arrest of Diego Varela was the final piece of the operation. Over the following days, the full scope of the investigation became public. 26 members of Varela's organization were charged with crimes ranging from drug trafficking to extortion to human trafficking. Roberto Fuentes, faced with overwhelming evidence and Laura's testimony, agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. His cooperation led to the identification of 3 corrupt police officers who had been protecting Varela for years. They were arrested and charged as well. The trial lasted 4 months. It was the biggest criminal case in the region in over a decade. Maria testified. Laura testified. Sofia testified. One by one, the women who had been hurt by Varela's organization stood up in court and told their stories. They spoke about the fear, the violence, the exploitation. They spoke about the years of silence, the feeling of being invisible, the belief that nothing would ever change. And they spoke about the moment when they realized that it could change, the moment they walked into a small studio, run by a woman named Maria Santos, and learned that they had the right and the ability to fight back. Diego Varela was convicted on 37 counts. He was sentenced to 45 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Roberto Fuentes received 15 years. The other members of the organization received sentences ranging from 5 to 30 years. The corrupt police officers were sentenced to 12 years each. The judge, in her closing remarks, said that this case was a testament to the courage of ordinary citizens who refused to accept the unacceptable. The video from Maria's studio cameras was played during the trial. The courtroom was silent as they watched Varela threaten Maria, raise the gun, and demand her cooperation. They watched Maria stand her ground, calm and composed, even as she stared down the barrel of a weapon. When the video ended, several members of the jury were visibly shaken. That video, more than anything else, sealed Varela's fate. It showed the world who he really was behind the expensive suits and the polished demeanor. In the weeks and months after the trial, Maria's life changed in ways she could not have imagined. Her story made national news. Journalists came from all over the country to interview her. She appeared on television, always calm, always modest, always deflecting attention from herself to the women who had been brave enough to speak up. She said repeatedly that she was not a hero. She said the heroes were the women who walked into her studio carrying years of pain and fear and still had the courage to start fighting. The attention brought opportunities. Maria received invitations to speak at conferences and events. She was asked to consult on self-defense programs in schools and workplaces. A foundation offered to fund the expansion of her studio. Within a year, the Santos Defense Academy had grown from one small room to a proper facility with multiple training areas, a counseling center, and a community room where women could gather for support and fellowship. Laura became one of Maria's lead instructors. She had found her calling in teaching, and her personal story gave her a connection to the students that was powerful and authentic. Laura eventually started her own program specifically for survivors of domestic violence, combining physical self-defense training with emotional support and practical resources. She called the program New Strength, and it became a model that was adopted by organizations in other cities. Sophia went back to school. She earned her high school diploma and then enrolled in a community college to study social work. She said that what had happened to her had broken her in ways that would take years to repair, but that meeting Maria had shown her that broken things could be put back together, sometimes stronger than they were before. Sophia now volunteers at a shelter for trafficking survivors, helping other young women find their way back to life. Detective Ana Reyes was promoted. The Varela case became the defining achievement of her career, and it led to a larger investigation into police corruption that resulted in the firing or prosecution of 11 officers across multiple departments. Ana continued to work closely with Maria, and the two women became close friends. They had dinner together every Thursday at a small restaurant near the studio. They never talked about the case during those dinners. They talked about books and movies and food and their families. They had earned the right to ordinary conversations. Carlos, Maria's old teacher, came to the opening of the new studio. He was 73 years old and walked with a cane, but his eyes were bright and his grip was strong when he shook Maria's hand. He looked around the new facility and nodded slowly. He said, "You know, when you were a skinny kid hitting the heavy bag in my old gym, I knew you were special, but I never imagined this." He paused and then added, "Your father would have been proud." Maria did not often think about her father. He had left when she was so young that she barely had memories of him. But Carlos's words hit her in a place she did not expect. She excused herself and went to the bathroom and cried for 5 minutes. Not because she was sad, because she was overwhelmed by the distance between where she had started and where she had ended up. Because she realized that every difficult thing that had ever happened to her, every struggle, every fear, every moment of pain had been a step on the path that led to this moment. And this moment was extraordinary. Maria Santos is still running the Santos Defense Academy. It has expanded twice more since its original renovation and now serves over 500 women and girls every week. The academy offers classes in self-defense, fitness, and personal development. It also provides counseling services, legal assistance, and job training. Maria has trained a team of 15 instructors, many of whom are former students, with their own stories of survival and strength. The neighborhood where Maria grew up has changed. It is not perfect. No neighborhood is, but the fear that once hung over it, like a permanent cloud, has lifted. Businesses have reopened. Families have returned. Children play in the streets without their parents watching from the windows. It is not entirely because of Maria. Many people contributed to the transformation. But Maria was the spark. She was the one who stood up when everyone else was sitting down. She was the one who showed people that it was possible to fight back and win. Maria does not think of herself as exceptional. When people call her a hero or a warrior or a guardian, She shrugs and says she is just a woman who learned to throw a punch. But the women who know her, the women who trained with her, the women who stood beside her through the darkest days, know the truth. They know that Maria Santos is all of those things and more. She is the proof that one person with enough courage and enough determination can change the world. Not the whole world, but the part of the world she can reach. And sometimes, that is enough. On the wall of the Santos Defense Academy, there is a framed piece of paper. It is old and creased, and the handwriting on it is messy and barely legible. It reads, "Stop teaching or we stop you." It was the first threatening note Maria received, the one she folded carefully and put in her desk drawer all those years ago. She had it framed and hung it on the wall as a reminder of where she came from, a reminder of what she faced, and a reminder that the people who tried to stop her failed. Underneath the framed note, Maria has written 3 words in her own handwriting: clean and strong and sure, still teaching.